Hi, and welcome. This is Rudy Rodriguez with the High Event Profit Show. And on today's show, we have a very special guest, Mr. Dominic, who actually has been in the event space since 2018. And interestingly enough, in the crypto space, I know there's a lot of interest in crypto. And he's hosted over a dozen events, has over 4,000 people who've attended his events as paying customers, has coordinated over 250 speakers who've spoken. And even recently, Dominic, you and I had the opportunity to play together at a recent event. So we're excited to have you on the show. And I think today the show title is something along the lines of teaching us how to really best serve our community with live events and how to get more high paying clients right now. So excited to have you on. Welcome, Dominic.
It's a pleasure to be here, Rudy. Thanks for having me on.
Most definitely, my friend. We'd love to jump right into the meat and potatoes for our audience and start, talking about some of your experience and some of your suggestions on the show topic. So love to hear from you, man. You recently did an event just like a month ago or so. It's very successful from what I could tell. And I'm curious to learn from you, what are some of the things that you do to prepare before an event? Looking back now, what's the advice you give yourself before you did your most recent event?
A lot of times, thanks, Rudy. I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on again. It's a pleasure to be here. It's events, they add gray hair. So they're pretty stressful, but really rewarding. Right. I find them to be really rewarding. I'm an extrovert by nature. So my fiance says, you're naturally made for events and now you're hosting them. So it's great, and it's also a way for us to serve our community. So that's the number one thing that we're really trying to accomplish is just serve our existing community of members and also obviously collect more. And so one of the things that we like to do is really forecast out at least a few months of runway of like what exactly needs to be done. When does it need to be done? So we're very structural that way. And you also helping us with that towards the end of that was really, really important. So it's great to have you integrated into that process. But one of the things is you need to identify, obviously, if you're going to have some external speakers, right? Is it just going to be you leading the event, or are you going to have external speakers? For us, we were going to have some external speakers. So being able to at least have those existing relationships to call on, or if you need to secure those relationships and you need to allocate some time for that. Right. So that's really, really important. So it depends on where you're starting as an event organizer. Are you doing it, for the first time, or are you doing this as a subsequent time and you already have an existing network of speakers that you'd like to bring in? I know for us, the first year that we did it, we had no brand recognition. We had no name. We had none of that. So we really had to pound the table and go and get that ourselves. And that was one of the things that I did that first year. And I crushed LinkedIn doing it. LinkedIn was our sole resource for being able to secure speakers to speak at our event. Another thing too is that you'll find is from a budgetary standpoint, you may not have a budget to pay a lot of speakers. And so for us, fortunately, we never had to pay them. There was maybe a few speakers, really high profile ones that we paid. But by and large, we didn't really compensate them other than room, hotel accommodations, things like that. On occasion, some air travel. That's one thing that you really got to consider is how many speakers are you going to have. Now, if you're not doing trade show style events like we did the first couple of years, then maybe your budgets aren't as big as what ours was. But that's something you have to consider because, like I said, we booked 250 speakers over 2 years. That would get obscenely expensive if you were having to cover travel and accommodations for a lot of those, right? So I think another key point here is you really need to understand what is the outcome that you're looking for. What is the goal of the event? Is it to enroll more high-paying clients into your business, or is it kind of more of a trade show style event like we did the first couple of years, right? So really having an idea on what that looks like and a crystal clear vision of what that is really, really important. From a syntax standpoint, knowing what that is, what you're optimizing for, now you can start to kind of build in a flow. And again, knowing whether you're going to have outside speakers or not, or if it's going to be all internal, that's going to obviously determine how much more runway that you need to plan for. But for us, doing that about our last event we did, let's see here, we really had about 2 months of runway of planning to do it. So we didn't have a lot of time. So fortunately, we had a good team behind us that was able to really execute on that. But also, with what goes on in our ecosystem, at least, maybe it is for some of the people that are listening to this, is that there's so much going on in the world right now. And with our industry, crypto, 1 month in crypto is like a decade in any other industry. So you gotta really be flexible. And so having flexibility also built into your event agenda and your syntax is extraordinarily important, because you may have an idea 2 months out of what you want to talk about, but then all of a sudden something massive in your industry happens and you need to include that, because if you don't include it, people that are there are going to kind of feel like they got gypped a little bit because you're not talking or you're not addressing about the elephant in the room. And so for us, that was Ukraine, right? What is the impact that Ukraine has had on global markets, on crypto, on macro, and all these kinds of things? So fortunately, we were able to adjust and we were able to actually include that and serve our clients at the highest level.
Awesome, man. Very cool. I appreciate you sharing all that and all of your experience with preparation. And speaking of speakers, I was very impressed by the lineup that you guys had at your recent event. I mean, they were world-class speakers, great engagement. Like, people were in the room most of the time. Like, they weren't in the hall, chit-chatting. They were in the room. They were so engaged. So thank you for sharing some of your strategies around lining up great speakers. And so I'm curious, Dominic, you do all the prep work to get people to an event. By the way, do you have any other tips you want to share as far as what worked for you as far as the most recent event and preparing and for the event and getting people there?
Yeah, I'll actually add a little bit even before that. So as it pertains to LinkedIn itself, right, going to the speaker themselves is probably, you could try that, right? But the first year that I did outreach for speaker outreach effectively on LinkedIn, not very many people accepted my LinkedIn request, right? As you can imagine. However, finding out which company they work for, going to somebody else inside the company, connecting with them, having a script, but also personalizing the script, because as anybody knows, when you get all those LinkedIn messages, you sense how much of them are canned and copywritten, and how much of them are actually legitimate and with this person actually writing a thoughtful message. So I would encourage you guys to definitely read the message back as if you were the recipient of it. And is this thing canned? Could this be construed as something that's just spam? And if so, change it, throw it away. And in fact, maybe even start with small messages to begin with, just to kind of get them to message you back, right? Because you want to at least get that engagement going, right? And then if that's somebody else in the company, like maybe, another executive, maybe they're a executive assistant, something like that, you definitely want to have your ducks in a row of what your pitch is too, right? It's got to be compelling enough for them to really want to be able to be a participant. Now, if you've already established yourself, this process becomes so much easier, right? Then you're able to obviously go to speakers who have already spoke at your event. You can utilize their networks, which, the second year that we produced an event, we had more speakers than we could possibly handle. We were sending people away. We were a lot more discerning that second year than we were the first year. And that's just a tale of 2 years between having no reputation in the space to then establishing yourself as having a very solid reputation. So I wanted to address that. The other thing as far as planning is concerned is, you really got to identify kind of which event are you really optimizing for? Are you optimizing for a high-end event? Are you selling a 50K mastermind on the back end, a 30K mastermind at the back end? If so, then you might want to have it at a pretty decent hotel, right? You want to create an experience for people that are there, because the whole while they're there, it's sales start from the minute they get in the door, right? In fact, I would say that it starts before that in the experience of actually registering, right? So all of these types of things, think of ways that you can do it to a higher degree, to a higher level, with additional nuance that kind of makes them feel supported. Rudy, we've even talked about, some creative white ideas of stuff that you can do online that like reward people who register by sending them, lunch to their house, right? Grubhubbing a lunch to their house, things like this that create that extra level of that 2 millimeter shift, as you like to call it, which I love. It's those types of things that are going to enhance the experience for these for your viewers and attendees all along the way. So obviously venue is being a very, very critical component for us. The first couple events that we did, right? Our identity was we were going to be a higher, like a VIP level event, right? So that's why we hosted our event on the Las Vegas Strip, right? The first event was at the Aria Hotel. Second event was at the Cosmopolitan the next year. And so having it at these really high profile places it really puts you on the map, right? And so venue is really important. Now, obviously it costs a lot of money to do that. So that may not be in your budget. but you have to kind of understand what is it that you're optimizing for. If you're going to sell a $50,000 mastermind on the back end, you probably don't want to have it at a Red Roof Inn, right? So, these are just things you need to consider.
That's a great point that I think might get overlooked is, what is the whole experience that's being created, including where's the hotel, right? You're asking for 50 grand, 100 grand, 30 grand. Like, you probably want to be somewhere nice, creating that experience the whole way through, right? It also anchors their experience, right? People are walking through a hotel and they have glass chandeliers and great service and great food. That whole experience is connected to you and your event. One of the things I appreciate about you, Dominic, and the Redwoods team at your recent event is you guys provided breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and like cocktails and all sorts of networking opportunities at no additional cost, really, just being there. And it was really, I was blown away by the experience that you guys created for your participants there. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I would be remiss to step over the fact that you're a great event promoter as well. I mean, you've had over 4,000 paid attendees at your events in the last, few years. And I'm curious to ask, man, like what works for you in the realm of like getting people to buy tickets and come to your events?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's being in a industry that is growing, that is very important, right? With crypto, the amount of people. Now, I will say this. I will say that we had the first year that we did an event, 2018, it was actually in a crypto bear market. Now, we didn't know that until after we had already done the event, right? Because things change quickly again. So you gotta understand where you're at in the cycle of your own industry. But for us, we didn't know what we didn't know. We were very fresh and new to the industry, number one, and number two, because we were using it as a reputation builder. So until after we did the event, we didn't recognize the how significant what we had accomplished, which by having 2,000 people there that year. Now, truth be told, we did give away a portion of those tickets to get people there. Still sold over 4,000 tickets over the course of 2 years. But that first year, we did have to create some additional incentives to get people to come. But by doing that, we also established our reputation. So that was really important. So I would say that from a promotion standpoint, having promotional partners is extraordinarily important, right? Having people who are going to vouch for you and expose you to their audiences, supremely important. I mean, we still have people that talk about our conferences back in 2018, 2019, still to this day. I was actually listening to a YouTube the other day of a guy who was an influencer that was on one of our panels back then, and he was talking about us. And I'm like, dude, the last time we did an event for that company was back in 2019, pre-pandemic. So to still be talked about in admirable terms many years later is obviously means that we did something right.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that because you are really good at promoting events. To your point, the thing I took away is being in a growing market, growing industry where there's a lot of interest, right? Very important. And you are in a very growing, probably one of the fastest growing markets on the planet, right? So
I'd have to agree.
Yeah.
Well, and something too, if I can say, Rudy, like for us, so here, contrast the differences here, right? So we had 2,000, little over 2,000 people at each event. Okay. However, that was in a bear market in our industry. In a bull market, which is, last year they had the first kind of Bitcoin conference. Let's see here. That was in June. I want to say May, June. There was over 13,000 people at that event in Miami. Right. So that gives you a clue, not only of how much the market has grown, but the difference between being in a bear market and being in a bull market. You're talking about over 6x increase from I mean, that's huge. That's the difference between you losing money on an event and you crushing it, absolutely crushing it. So granted, those things are considerable. You can't ignore where you're at in a cycle. Like if you're hosting an event and it's in a bear market, okay, or we're in a macroeconomic decline, okay, maybe you need to change your pricing structure. Or maybe now you're doing a virtual event instead of an online or instead of a live event, right? To reduce costs. Because, if you've ever hosted a live event, you understand that all your costs or most of your costs, are going to the hotel or the venue, right? And so it's significant. It's significant. So understanding that, I mean, even if you're not in a cyclical, you're not a cyclical industry like I am, like maybe you're in, I guess real estate's somewhat cyclical, but it's not probably as cyclical as crypto, but you still got to understand what's going on in the macro econ, right? Like things can change pretty quickly. And if you can't adjust to, like, maybe you having hosting a live event, you need to switch to a virtual event, something like that. You do need to be aware of that. Otherwise you can wipe yourself out pretty quickly, pretty easily if you're not careful.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks for the highlight on that. I'm sure there's just many listeners here who are investing in crypto and are very aware of some of those factors as well. But yeah, to your point, whatever industry you're in doing an event, and you got to be aware of where you're at in the cycle of that industry, or even in the cycle of events in general, right? Like there was a point in time where all events had to go online because of said pandemic, and now some events are moving back into person, and that's a cycle in itself, right? So thankfully, you guys were able to do an in-person event recently fairly successfully, which is really cool to see. I saw all those super happy people joining your high-end mastermind program, which is great. So speaking about the event itself, Dominic, you really hit the stage very well at this event. I know you put in a lot of preparation to make sure that you captivated your audience during the event. What were some of the things that you focused on during the event to create that community and ultimately to lead to those high-paying clients?
You were really instrumental in that, Rudy, in contracting you to work with us on that, because you were able to really illustrate the 4 different archetypes that are out there that most people fall into, and what they're, not only the archetypes themselves, but what causes them pain and what causes them pleasure, right? And being able to weave that messaging into the presentation and the pitch, I think was extraordinarily important, because that I probably know some of that, but I didn't know all of it and know it to the degree, and then implementing it, obviously, and then practicing it, right? I know we practiced that thing a lot, right? And that's another thing I would say to, hey, listen, if you're doing a pitch at an event, which obviously you should be, if you're not, you should be, but if you're doing a pitch, you really better have that pitch down, right? And the more confident and more certain you are in it and your delivery of it from stage is going to determine your level of results that you get. And so having adequate time to really practice that, I think is supremely invaluable.
Awesome. Yeah. And for the listeners who aren't quite sure what we're referring to, so we're talking about personality archetypes. And what we did is we had a little mnemonic way of remembering the 4 different disc profiles, right? The 4 main categories, and how to be able to speak directly to each one. And we wove that into all the critical presentations, including the offer. And it made a difference, man, when you hit the stage and you just came out hitting, basically speaking right to their hearts and their minds. And, you had them captivated, which was really cool.
I appreciate that. No, and you also helped with a lot of those little 2mm shifts about like standing tall, of where, not moving side to side, because I'm a pacer, right? When I get on stage, I like to pace, I like to walk. I feel more comfortable doing it, but a lot of times that's not most effective, right? You need to really stay in your center, and be centered when you're delivering those important elements of the presentation. And so you helping me really develop that muscle memory for that was really important. I think it relayed itself well to the community and to the audience.
Yeah, most definitely. You did a great job there, man. So, it brings us to the point of the event where it's time to make the invitation, time to ask people to raise their hand and to, become members of your community at a higher level. Can you tell us a little bit about what your approach was at this most recent event, and, how you went about doing it? People are always curious to wonder, hey, how did they ask for the sale? How did they enroll people into their mastermind program? So if you could speak to that for our listeners.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So what was interesting is we started with an application, right? So because we're doing a high-end mastermind, our offer was $30K. Now we did do a payment plan that we offered to people, but the offer is $30K, and to offer that from stage feels a little bit interesting. So instead of doing that, we opted to do an application process. So we had black manila envelopes with the writing of "You're invited" in like a silver lettering, right? And so those envelopes had a couple different documents in there. First, they had a letter that was written by our CEO or our founder. And it was just essentially kind of like what we're looking for. It was really underscoring what would make a good fit with us. Like, what is it that we are promising to deliver, and so that you have an understanding of what that is. So that way there's less you're minimizing questions by doing that, but you're also really trying to qualify that other person. Like, hey, I'm not a good fit for this. Okay, great. Then you understand that you're not a good fit. Or someone who wants to aspire to be that good fit, now it makes them want to, move to the next step. So then there's another page that has a QR code on it that people can scan that with their phone, and then it takes them right to the application process. And then they're going to fill in all their information. Now, to your point, another 2mm shift there was really communicating from stage the importance of them taking this seriously, that this is really an application. It's not that we're just going to let everybody in, which we don't let everybody in. So because we have had bad fits in the past, and that doesn't serve them and it doesn't serve us, because now we're having to, deal with things that we don't want to deal from an accounting perspective, and then just, customer satisfaction, things like that, right? We want to make sure that we are a good fit from the get-go. And so really it's emphasizing the importance to the audience that, hey, be as thorough as you possibly can in these questions. And that document that you helped us create and really custom tailor for our audience was really important, Rudy. So having that, now they've completed that, they paid the $497. That's the application fee that we instilled. You guys might have a different application fee that you want to do. Ours was $497. Now we have an interested buyer. We've got somebody who's raised their hand, literally and figuratively. We've got somebody who's raised their hand and said, I am interested. I want to move to the next step of whatever you guys are offering, right? And then so the next day or the remainder of that day, I have an opportunity to meet with those clients one-on-one and really ascertain whether they're going to be a good fit or not, and how we can best serve them.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I love the way you went about that, just so tactful, respectful, and how you led your presentation with a lot of education, right? You led with great market research, great statistics, and to show them like where they're at. And so many people, especially in your space, thought they were maybe too late to get in, right? And that you made it was a really solid case, and it just seemed like the natural next step to be part of your community, right? To take advantage of such an amazing timing in the marketplace and timing on the planet and where we're at right now. And I love how you meet with people individually and qualify them and manage their expectations so that they know what you're getting. They know what they're getting, and you know what you're getting.
Yeah. And like I said, there's nothing worse than having a bad fit. You don't want a bad fit in your community, right? And I know many people, many gurus in the past who are all, marketing gurus that say, hey, listen, find out who your ideal client is. And the more ideal clients that you can have, the more, it's not going to feel like work, right? Because it's a part of your family. They're a part of who you are and who you're trying to serve at the highest level. But you find someone who's not an ideal client and quite the contrary, and it's going to really complicate your life. And it's going to create unnecessary strife for you and for them. And so not being afraid to say no, if I'm saying that properly. So don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to disqualify someone, not just because of money, but because of personality, because of fit, whatever it is. Don't be afraid to disqualify someone. I think also not only does that but it creates a dynamic where you really know who you are, and it puts you in a position of power. And I think when you come from that position, I just think good things happen.
100%. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, don't be afraid to disqualify someone. Not everybody's a fit. Thanks for sharing that, man. And so this kind of brings us to the part of our interview where we're gonna do some kind of rapid fire, quick questions, and just to kind of see what you got to share with us here. So I'm curious, would you say like 3 secrets that you learn, or 3 strategies, things that you learn from hosting your most recent event that would help other people have profitable and impactful events? Like, what are like the top 3 tips or secrets that you would suggest? Kind of rapid fire. What comes to mind?
Well, I'd say really allocating time to connect with people off stage. So many people, they're not going to, like you're going to open up for Q&A and things like that, but people aren't they're going to have the courage to ask questions from their seat, especially with like a smaller, more intimate event. Our last event was around 100 people. So it's even smaller, but you're still going to get those people that are not going to ask those questions. So being able to really connect with people, not only that, but you're going to have an opportunity now to really find out what their wants, needs, and desires are. Right? How invaluable is that to understand what their wants, needs, and desires are? Now you can like really speak to that and help them and help serve them, and why, being a part of your community at a higher level is so valuable, right? So that's one thing. Another secret is there's little things you can do that really go a long way that are not that expensive. So like for us, for this event, we had not a big budget to do this event. It was kind of like we were serving two purposes before we even hosted the event. We were serving our existing clientele, but we also wanted to open it up for potentially new clients. And we were producing our event on the back end of another major event from someone else who is a big titan in the space. I don't want to mention their name, but there's somebody who has our target market inside of our for our community, right? So many in their community could also be part of our community. And so we hosted an event on the backside of their event, and it was free for them to come in. So being able to really attract them in was great. However, it required an enormous amount of flexibility, because prior to our first event, we did not know if we were going to have 30 guests. We didn't know if we were going to have 100 guests. We didn't know if we were going to have 200 guests. So we had to be very, very flexible. And so having some flexibility built in for us specifically was very, very important. So that's I think number two. And number three, I'd say, I know I was going to say the 2 millimeter things. So the small little nuance things, right? So, having to step and repeat, having a good videographer there to really capture some B-roll and some testimonials, right? Asking the right questions for your testimonials, because if you're not optimizing for good testimonials, now you're missing an opportunity to really create a good sizzle video and a good sizzle reel later that you're going to use in your marketing. So having those types of things, and those are the types of things that I wouldn't recommend skimping a budget on, right? To pay a little bit more for a videographer that really knows what they're doing and that can edit and cut that to the point where it's going to really produce sales. That's something that you don't want to negotiate dollars and cents on,
Yeah, I definitely seen the power of a good videographer recently at events and the B-reel and how that helps down the road too. Awesome, man. Thanks for sharing those three quick tips there. Now, what would you say is a book or maybe a resource that you would recommend to people who want to host profitable live events?
That's a good question. I don't know about a book necessarily. A resource is, what I would just do is I would model other events, right? I would connect with other event organizers, whether they're in your same industry or other industries, find out who they're using. Find out who they're using for AV. Never use the hotel AV, by the way. Like, that's just a bad idea in general. And with us hosting events in Vegas, I mean, we had to use their unions, right? So that was challenging. Now our AV we were able to use, but with everything else, you're paying triple, quadruple the fees that you would normally pay, but you have really no choice if you're going to end up using hotels that are unionized hotels. So that's another 2 millimeter thing that I'd make sure that you're looking at is this a unionized venue? Because you're going to pay more for it. You're going to pay more for everything. I mean, like when I first heard about how much we had to pay for a cup, like one of those things of coffee on the Las Vegas Strip, I about lost my mind. And that was before inflation. Imagine what it is now, right? So those things you have to really, really consider. So what I'd recommend is just finding other event organizers. Obviously, maybe you don't want to approach event organizers in your industry, but find some event organizers in other industries that are similar size. So like if you're running a mastermind, who's another mastermind in a similar, in maybe a different niche that can, who's done it many years before. And, hey, I use this AV company and I've had really good results. Or I use, this company for lanyards and I've had really good results. Or I've had, this videographer, for instance. So, don't try to reinvent the wheel. There's other professionals out there that, again, you're going to want to find, but, just doing a Google search may not yield you the right people or the right AV person. Now, fortunately, I have a good friend of mine who's been in AV for 20 years, and he's done a lot of the top, digital marketers events over that 20 years. So being able to have him as a good friend of mine, that obviously helped things. And then I could rely on him for, hey, what do you think about this person? Or what about this person? What about this resource? Right. So just being able to have something like that in the event industry is supremely important.
I agree 100%. I love what you said about modeling someone else who's gotten the result that you want, right? We have a mutual mentor that talks about this process of mastery, and you find someone who's already done it, who's a master of what they do. you know, go learn from them, have an immersive experience with them, pay them,
Yeah.
you know, and then train with them, right? And to learn that. So same thing applies with events, right? It's important to model and learn from others. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that. I
Yeah.
appreciate
The same thing we're doing, Rudy, for our customers is the same thing. It's literally, it's just a recipe that you just keep using the same recipe, no matter what you're doing, whether it's an event or whether you're serving your customers with it. It's the same thing.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you. And Dominic, for our listeners here, for people who want to learn more about you and your services, your company, how can they reach you? What's the best way?
Great. Yeah, you can go to our website. You go to redwoodscrypto.com. That, you know, we have a free newsletter that we give out to people who are interested in keeping up to date in crypto. If you got any questions for me, you can hit me on my email, which is Dominic, DOMINIC @redwoodscrypto.com. So feel free to drop me a line, and you know, I'll hit you back.
Awesome, man. Appreciate that. And just from more of a curious perspective, what's like the next summit or the next goal that you have that you want to climb, and what do you perceive to be like the challenge or the obstacle that you want to overcome?
Yeah, so great question, Rudy. So we already have an idea on another event that we can do later, well, late summer, early fall, a live event. And then our goal is to do 2 to 3 virtual events this year. So that'll be unique because having done live events and then moving into a virtual thing with my dogs barking in the background, that's going to be fun, right? But you know, I just recently did a virtual event of, you know, like a Tony Robbins virtual event just recently. And, you know, when he first came out with the virtual events, I was like, it's going to be nowhere near, you know, the experience because I'm used to doing his events live, right? So it's going to be nowhere near the quality, right? And I was astounded. Now, obviously, he's the best in the industry of what he does. You know, he's been doing this for many, many years. But for him to pivot from live events to virtual events, and for it to still be the quality that it was, I was astounded. I couldn't believe how great it was. I mean, I'm sitting there with my daughter and we're having a blast and we're jumping around. It was like we were being at a rock concert in our house. Now, for me to be able to share that with her in a virtual environment is not something I would have been able to do when we, you know, doing live events. You know, take her out of school for a week and then take her to Chicago to go to a live event. But now in this virtualized environment, this economy that we live in that's now virtualized, is it enables that to happen. So, you know, granted, it's harder to keep people's attention, but if we can do that, if we can captivate people's attention and keep them glued to what our message is from a virtual environment, think about how many more people you can scale to, how many more eyeballs you can get access to, and how many more people you can serve. And it's really exciting, and at a lower cost, at a far infinitely lower cost. So I think it's just really exciting to be able to, you know, now that, you know, the world's kind of starting to open up and there is a demand to get out there and get into live events, but still having the virtual where we can kind of lean back on and say, hey, it's there if we need it.
Yeah, agreed, man. Virtual is here to stay for sure, and it's only getting better. And yeah, live events in person are back too, but I think moving forward, the virtuals will be here, and there'll be combinations of the two, hybrid or what have you. Congratulations on setting the target of 2 to 3 virtual events this year. That's exciting, and look forward to seeing how that develops. And again, one more last personal question here. What's the legacy you want to leave, Dominic? When it's all said and done, what do you want to be remembered for?
You know, man, that's a really great question. I appreciate it. You know, I in 2017, the light bulb moment, as everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people, they experience this kind of eureka moment in their life where they're like, you know, nothing's the same after that moment. And for me, that was that moment in late 2017 when after all the study and all the research, I realized that blockchain, that there was going to be no greater financial opportunity in my life than there was going to be afforded by the innovation of blockchain and crypto over the next 2 decades. And so having that realization has driven my behavior. I redesigned my entire career. I used to be a pharmacist before all this, like, believe it or not, that's kind of doesn't really match my identity, but at least so I'm told. But once I redesigned that and shifted perspective and completely changed my career path, you know, my goal and my purpose now is to carry that torch and share with as many people the enthusiasm that I have for this technology and how big of an opportunity it is. And so my legacy is, if I can just help one small person to really kind of open that, just for that light bulb moment to go on for them, I've done my service.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing that. And for people who are still listening at this point, I do recommend follow Dominic, follow their company, go to redwoodscrypto.com, get on their mailing list, and tune into what they have to share. There's a lot of really great education out there that they provide, and there's a lot of bad education out in the space as well, unfortunately, but I think Redwoods Crypto and Dominic and their team provide really great resources, really trustworthy, above the board, honest, non-hypey resources in a market full of sharks.
Indeed.
Dominic, you guys have a nonprofit, I believe, that you support as well. Can you just really briefly share a little bit about the cause and give a quick shout out for that? And we'll leave a link for it in our show notes as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rudy. I appreciate that. Yeah. So kind of the genesis of how we were created was we were inspired by a meditation that our founder had, Vijay Anma. And so he had a meditation. He was actually in the Redwoods forest, and one of these things that he was wondering about is like, how to create a very anti-fragile portfolio. And so redwood trees, suffice it to say, I won't go into the real details here, but they're one of the most anti-fragile organisms in the world. With their intense structure, and it was so robust and so strong. And so we felt that was a good analogy to what we were trying to create and help investors navigate both boom and bust markets in crypto. And so Redwoods became the name of our company. And then we're like, okay, well, there's this nonprofit called Save the Redwoods. And so for every member that we have that comes in, we plant a redwood tree seedling for them. And so it's important for us to save the redwoods because, with everything going on in the world and, how things are changing and climates and all that stuff, they're being impacted just like many other different things, many other different nuances throughout the climate. So that's near and dear to us. So Save the Redwoods is a cause that we like to support.
Awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that. We'll be sure to share a link with our listeners as well. Well, Dominic, it's been a pleasure having you on as our special guest today. Thank you for sharing your expertise, not only in events, but also in the crypto and blockchain space, and your enthusiasm for sharing that with other people. It's really appreciated. And it's everything you shared today. Thank you so much, man. Wishing you well on your endeavors. And for audience listening to the show, if you found value, please be sure to give it a positive rating in the show store, wherever you're listening to it. And if you know someone who is hosting an event soon or is thinking about hosting an event, be sure to share this episode and this podcast with them as well. Again, thank you, Dominic. Appreciate you for being on. And that's a wrap. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Rudy.